but having a lot of consumer reporting, a lot of writing, producing, and anchoring. And then I was thrown onto the streets of New York, which is a real treat.
You must have, weren't you terrified?
Terrified, yes. And after 6 months there, and you'd come back in the afternoon having been to a major demonstration and a huge fire in the downtown streets of New York, and you'd be madly writing your copy, and you'd think, am I going to make it before the 6 o'clock show? And you'd say, why did I leave Sacramento? I was comfortable, I was an anchor person, I never went out on the streets, but I'm glad I did it. It was 6 years of reporting on the street is very tough work. But it's wonderful background, and I think that it's a good thing to have behind you if you're going to then stay in a studio and talk with all these people who are bringing in their problems that are out on the street.
You know, one thing I'm curious about, a lot of us, when we think about moving up, making a change, we always think, I'm too scared, it's too big, I can't do it. But is it ever really that much different? Is New York that much different than Sacramento once you get used to it?
Not once you get used to it. You want me to be honest? It was very different. I mean, I really went from the little leagues to the big leagues. I mean, I went out with crews who asked me questions that I had no idea what they were talking about. Techniques were very different in a major market like that. Just the union situation. You know, I would go to grab some film. I mean, I used to carry the lights. I carried the film, and they'd say, no, you can't touch that. You're not in that union. It was a whole different ball game. And it was pretty scary at the beginning. However, you know, we all have this inertia. I mean, we don't want to go because we think we're doing so well where we are, and should we really take that chance? What if I fail? And I just figured the worst thing that could happen is I could not make it, and I'd go back to Sacramento.
Not so bad.
And it wasn't so bad. I'd be on the air, and I figured I might as well take the chance. And I'll tell you, most people said to me at the time, are you nuts? Are you really going to, how do you think you're going to do that? And I said, you know, I learned what to do here. I consider myself a good study, and I'll learn. And that's exactly what happened. It wasn't easy, but you learn and you move on. If you aren't willing to take those chances, as Betty Davis says, no guts, no glory, it's really true.
Okay. I could go on, but we don't want to leave the audience out. So why don't we begin?
I'm delighted to have you in Jacksonville. Welcome. I'm wondering, though, what's next for you? I mean, you are the host of the #1 show in the morning, Good Morning America. Are you worried about the future? What's going to happen? I mean, now that you've made it big, it's awfully early to peak.
I have no feelings that, as to that kind of feeling that there's nowhere to go or nowhere to expand. I'm expanding now and will continue to do so. Sometimes you have to think about it and decide where you want to go and design your own life. I've done that by deciding what kind of projects do I want to do on the outside besides Good Morning America. And I became very involved in the subject of parenting, I think by virtue of staying on the air pregnant through 2 full pregnancies up until really a week before birth. And I became this known working mother. So I decided to go with the flow, as they say, and I started doing parenting programs. And these are things that I enjoy doing. They're things I can involve my family in. My husband produces them. My children are there while we do it. And it's allowed me to do these other projects and not take time away from my family. And I just plan, I mean, we have so many ideas that we have to take them one at a time. It's hard to, you get excited about so many of them. So that's how I'm expanding. As far as my main Good Morning America show, it's like, where is the grass greener? You know, you don't leave something. For one thing, there's really no other program like ours, unless they want to do a Good Night America, a Good Evening America, so we could do the same thing and not have to get up at 3:30 in the morning. That we'd listen to. We'd listen to that offer.
When you look ahead 10 years down the road, do you see yourself still
in television? Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. I think that as we, you know, maybe 10 years ago I wouldn't have said that because I would have thought, oh, they're never going to have us on the air when we're that old. But today now, it seems like the older we get, it's becoming, you know, the time that they'll allow you to stay on the air is being pushed back. And I think that people like Barbara Walters have paved the way for those of my generation in order to allow us now to stay on the air and not expected to be replaced by, you know, a 22-year-old because you're 42 years old. That used to happen, of course. It's not happening as much these days. I think things are really changing in that sense. That's a good change, and I think it is here. Who else has a question?
Yes, in the newest issue of Savvy magazine, there's an article about you, the three of you who are on the morning news shows. I don't know whether you've had a chance to read it or not.
Oh, I haven't yet.
Yeah, it was an interview,
Glad to
and
know
it
that's
talked
out.
about you and the other two I won't mention. Of course, you're still #1 according to the, but they, in it, you were quoted as saying some things that Barbara Walters had said, and several of you were talking about how you feel as the second person on the show, so to speak. But I thought it was a real upbeat, positive way of expressing the fact that we're here and we're, as you say, going with the flow. Where do you see the role of women advancing in the television industry?
Well, the comments that you're talking about, Barbara Walters, I assume, is when she came to me very early on when I took over at Good Morning America and said, don't try to grab it all because you think you're going to get half equal, because you're not. And you can spend your time here beating your head up against the wall and being unhappy, and that's very unproductive. If you really want to help yourself and help other women, you will take what little bits they give you and you will make each one of them a gem. You will follow up on every contact that you make on this show. You will write thank you notes, and the next time those people come to town, they will call you for the interview. And she was right. It happened again and again. I did my homework and did a great interview with Richard Burton, sent him a nice thank you note. The next time he was in town, he called me for the interview. And so I learned from Barbara Walters, and I did the very best with all the little parts they gave me, and lo and behold, my part started growing. And I think if you've watched Good Morning America over the last 5 years, you'll know that my role on that show has grown tremendously. Sunday when I go back, I'm spending the afternoon with Nancy Reagan interviewing her. Monday morning I'm interviewing Geraldine Ferraro. I spent yesterday with George Burns and Lucille Ball after the show. I'm flying in 2 weeks to do Prince Rainier and Princess Stephanie and Prince Albert. When Prince Charles came to the United States, I was given the interview. Those things probably would not have happened 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I think that that's very encouraging. I think that we have, just like I hate to even, the women's movement, shall we say, the progression of women in this country grows in spurts and then stops a little bit and then grows in spurts. I think it's the same thing on television. I think that television certainly just is a reflection of how we're doing out there in the society as general. So when you see all of a sudden things stop a little bit, I don't get discouraged by that. It really does go, it seems to go in cycles.
There are still lines to be crossed, I guess.
Oh, sure.
If Yasser Arafat is interviewed on Good Morning America, you can pretty well bank on the fact that David Hartman is going to do the interview. Does that bother you at all?
Sure, would I like to be able to do those interviews? I would be lying if I didn't say yes. However, I also came into this job very aware of the fact that David Hartman had been the host of the show since day one, 10 years. I've been with the show for 9 years as a reporter, but I've only been co-host of the show for 5 years, going almost 6 years. The show was set up to have one main host and another person there who was in a co-host capacity, but still with one main host. It was set up that way 10 years ago. It is still that way today. I took the job with my eyes open. I understood what the job was, and I think it's one of the best jobs in television, if not one of the best jobs in the world. So I'm very happy with that, and that's not to say that I don't fight every now and then for an interview. You have to kind of, you know, stretch a little bit, but I fight with the producers, not with David, and that's also a very smart thing to do. Mm-hmm. You know, you maintain that relationship that is what makes our show as successful as it is a wonderful, friendly relationship between David and myself.
I wondered if I could ask you to share with us one of your most challenging interviews and maybe then one of your most rewarding.
A couple things come to mind when you say challenging. Comedians are always tough to interview. I mean, a Bob Newhart is tough to interview because you never know whether he's really answering you or giving you a line because he's so deadpan. But probably one of the most exciting and interesting interviews I ever did was Prince Charles. The night before, some of the royal party had invited us to dinner, and they interviewed us, I guess to see if we were fit for a king. That was pretty much what it was, and we were instructed that we were not to extend our hand before he extended his hand. We were not to sit before he sat. We were not to speak before he spoke. We were to call him Your Royal Highness to start, and Sir after that. And then by the time you walked out, and that we would have 10 minutes from the time your tushy touched the chair until the stopwatch went off, and no more than that. And we were all put into a gallery, Jane Pauley, Diane Sawyer, and myself, and in a little art gallery off this beautiful room where they were doing the interview at out in the deserts of New Mexico at a school that he was coming out to celebrate its anniversary. And so we were all together, and they flipped a coin to see who would go first. I mean, everything was done to set you up to be nervous. By the time you walked out there, it was like patting your head and rubbing your stomach, like, what do we do first? He was, though, a charmer, and certainly had a charisma about him that there are a few people in this world that when they walk into the room, they may be world leaders, they may be celebrities, but that have something about them. It is a charisma, it is something that's hard to describe, and he had it. We were also instructed that we could not talk about family, anything personal, certainly nothing about Randy, who had just at that moment had his, the big scandal with Koo Stark. And they basically boiled it down to the only thing that we had to talk to him about was the opening of the school, which of course was not really what any of us wanted to talk to him about. So you had to be very clever. Somehow there's a bad connotation to that word, but we'll use it anyway. Clever in your line of questioning so that you could talk. I decided to use this line of questioning. I asked him about the school, and as long as we're on the subject of school, how about your own education, like when you were little? And we got him talking about growing up and his education as a youngster. And then it was obvious to say, well, is that kind of education you'd like for your children? And I finally got him into, and it was done, though, in such a way that he answered the questions quite willingly. He was quite thoughtful, quite sensitive, and really quite forthcoming. And it turned out to be a very personal and sensitive interview. But it was one where you had to be so acutely aware of where you were going and how to get there. And that's probably a good example of a challenging interview. Another interview that's challenging is when you have a debate between, say, Phyllis Schlafly and, I mean, when you have a debate with two people who are pros at debating their subject, there's no winning. Because no matter what you do, you will get dozens of letters the following week who will say either, half the letters will say, you're usually so nice, but I thought you were just terrible to poor Mrs. Schlafly. And the other half the letters will say, you should have been tougher on her. What's the matter with you? So, it's always hard to try to stay really objective is what you're supposed to do. And take an interview down a path and not let somebody get their points of view across without challenging them, and yet at the same time not seeming like you're taking a point of view. That can be challenging.
Next question.
Joan, how do you think your public image as a broadcast journalist changed when you became a mother? Were you worried that people might not take you as seriously?
That's very interesting. It was a concern beforehand, and I guess right after I had the baby, it was a concern because of the fact that when I had my first child, I insisted that I bring her to work with me, mainly because I decided that one of my priorities in life was that I breastfeed my child and that I spend that time with my child when she was little, even though I had built up this incredible career, and I was able to make the two work together. ABC allowed in my contract the provision to bring the baby to work. I didn't realize at the time what that was going to mean for corporations around the country, what kind of precedence it was setting. When we went to do and everybody wanted to do interviews because of that, every magazine, every newspaper, they all came to me and wanted to interview me. So John Goodman, who's here with us today, set up a press conference, and all these newspapers came, and he was quite concerned that because all these people wanted to talk to me about motherhood and how I was bringing the baby to work, that it was going to destroy my credibility as a news reporter. Well, none of us could have predicted at the time how this would have gone, and we all had that concern. But interestingly enough, it was the opposite effect. For the first time, prior to that, I had been written up as, you know, that blonde on the news. You know, that's what they always like, oh, that blonde on Channel 7. All of a sudden, I was viewed, I think by the critics, by my peers, and by the audience, as a working mom, someone who they knew had diapers at night and was up in the middle of the night, who had responsibilities and joys and sorrows, and it really, I think, broke down a tremendous barrier between myself and the audience, and people suddenly reacted to me in a very different way on the street, and the letters were very different that were coming into me. And what to some people may be a sudden stop in their career, a pregnancy, to me I could probably describe it no better than to say that it was a boon to my career. It was a tremendous help to my career. Who would have predicted that ahead of time? Who would have ever guessed? But in the end, it turned out to be something that was really helpful to my image.
I have a question for you relating to this. I'm really going to be interested to hear what you have to say. And anybody who works and has kids, you probably go by the rule of if the boss wants you to work 5 hours late every day that week, and you don't want to because you've got your family at home, you got your kids, you need to go take care of them, make up some other story for why you can't. Don't use your family as the reason that you can't devote all this extra time to work. And that's always bugged me. I've always thought, let's be realistic. I have a family. This is what I want to go do, but I live by the rule. I don't say it's my family, you know, it's some other reason. What about that? Do you go by the rule of don't mention your family as a reason that you can't devote lots of, you know, whatever?
Probably because of my circumstance and exactly what we've been talking about here. ABC is now aware of my image and how valuable that image is to their show. Our show is a very warm, family feeling show, even though it is a news and information show. It is that aspect of our show, I think, that makes our show as successful as it is. Therefore, I believe at this point in time, at the beginning they may not have realized it, maybe subconsciously they did, but I think at this point in time they realize that it is because I stuck to my priorities that made me this image, and therefore that is what is valuable to them today, and therefore they honor that a little bit more. And sometimes when they push it, I'll say, you know, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have me, the working mother. If you want to have someone who can flit off to Timbuktu every 3 days, then go hire a young girl who doesn't have a family and who can travel around all the time. You hired in me a specific commodity. But what you see is what you get. Now you got to live with it. No, I can't go to Yugoslavia for 2 weeks and be there at the Olympics. I'll compromise with you as a working mother. I'll go for a week. And they have worked with me all the way along, and it's a give and take. I mean, it's always a give and take. But probably I have it a bit easier in that I do say, yes, I will stay, you know, after getting up at 3:30 in the morning, yes, I will stay and do an interview at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but I am going home at 4 because I am going to be home with my children in the afternoon. I won't stay and do that interview at 6 o'clock at night. You have to, at some point, decide what your priorities are and set some guidelines so that you can be true to them, because if you aren't, then you're unhappy, and eventually it just doesn't work.
So is your advice then go ahead and be upfront about the fact that you have a family and you have responsibilities and just compromise on your career? What advice would you have?
On your career?
Well, no, I mean, as you were saying, compromise. Okay, I'll stay an extra 2 hours, but I won't stay an extra 6
I think that it's a good idea to try to work with your boss, but I don't like laying problems in bosses' laps. I don't think that that's, I mean, I've always told women, if you're pregnant, you don't walk in and say, hey, I'm pregnant, what are you going to do about it? That's just not fair. It's up to you to decide some kind of alternative plan and try to make your boss realize that you are valuable and somehow you are going to work with him so that you can accomplish what you want but not let him down. But you're so valuable to him that why go hire someone brand new and train someone new? You'll work with another person until you can come back full time.
Be clever.
You know, be clever. Think of something imaginative, but it's your problem. It's not his problem. So I don't believe in just laying a problem like that in someone's lap. However, I think you do have to kind of set your priorities as well. I think an awful lot of mothers these days are unhappy because when they feel pressured and they don't keep their priorities, then they're unhappy. Then they feel guilty all the time.
So it's a no-win.
It's a no-win situation.
Okay, we've only got about 5 minutes left, so let's move along. Next
Okay.
question.
Joan, I wanted to follow up a little bit about your talking about taking your child to work. One of the things that the Mayor's Commission on the Status of Women is interested in is corporate daycare.
Oh.
Has ABC expanded for other people to bring their children? Is there any move that way, or what do
We've
you
sure
think about
tried.
that?
We haven't been successful at that one yet. I am a huge proponent of on-site daycare. To me, it is the idea to let your female employees in a large corporation, to let them bring that child, put them in somewhere that is close by so that they can work and be a much more productive employee. Just go down and spend time at lunchtime with their child and then pick up the child and go directly home. Mothers today who have to take children to daycare and then go to work and then go see them and then go back to work and then go back and pick them up and then go home, it's just too much, and these women are really burning out. And it's a problem that I think our whole society is going to have to recognize now that we are a two-paycheck society. It's here. It's not going away. It is growing, and it's a societal problem that we have to recognize and deal with and make some adjustments to accommodate this. Otherwise, the women in our society are really burning out. I see it a lot. You can't imagine the letters I get. If only you knew how much mail I get in my office from these women. And they turn to me because they saw me bring the child to work and you know how to do it, and they write to me with their problems. But they also write to me to say sometimes, gosh, I never would have even thought about asking my boss to let me bring my child to work. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for, letting my boss realize that pregnancy is not a disease, that your mind does not stop functioning because you have a growing child in your uterus, and that they for the first time decided to ask, and that lo and behold they set up a daycare center. And those are the letters that you like to get.
We probably have time for about one more, I think.
Joan, I wanted to ask you, in the letters you get and the feedback from people, do you find that men are entering more into the parenting process in the families that you hear about?
Oh, most definitely. Oh, I think it's a natural thing that has to happen with more women working. Unfortunately, women have had to start in their new roles faster than men have had to start into their new roles. So there's a gap there, and women are expected really to keep the traditional role and the new role too much all too often. But I think the more we can present the father's role on television, the more television is so impactful. It really is. And I think that we have to do our part in presenting that to the general audience so that fathers out there will see it being done. I think a lot of men just feel, well, my father never did it, and none of the guys I know do it, therefore I'm sure not going to do it. Well, if we can present to them programming that shows that is a wonderful, good, productive, and mature role model, then perhaps we can change that. I do a program on ABC's cable channel called Lifetime that is called Mother's Day. It's a parenting program. And we are expanding that show this year to a nighttime version of the show, a 1-hour version rather than a half-an-hour version. And we are changing the name of it, something like the Family Hour or something, because they want to not only have it Mother's Day, but they want it to be for fathers too. And we will be interviewing many more fathers, and we will be doing exactly what you're talking about and trying to make that role of the father out there something that's more livable for the mother.
Well, I wish we had time for many more questions. Unfortunately, we don't. I didn't think 30 minutes could go this quickly, but it has.
They'll hear the rest in the speech.
That's right. That's right, for the luncheon. But if you all feel as I do, then you feel a little bit more inspired to have it all and to manage everything.